Wow.
If you were talking to yourself 10, 20 years ago, what would you say? What would you say as far as leadership and managing and manage your own business and things you would have perhaps done differently?
Um, so I don't mind telling my age. I am 41 years old. So when I was young, I was a very strange child. Let me just say that up front. At
We're all
11,
strange in some kind of way.
um, and at 11 years old, I did something that I actually would recommend everybody do. I made a matrix on my own. I listed out on the left column things that I absolutely love doing: singing, playing the piano, painting, helping people. And then in the middle column, it was things that I was good at. And surprisingly, the things that I was good at weren't always the same as the things that I enjoyed. And then the third column was things that I knew that I could actually make money doing. How could I support myself? So even though I loved playing the piano, frankly, I was terrible and I could never, ever, ever make money doing it. So I crossed it off. The only thing that crossed all three columns on that little matrix that I made at 11 years old was human sciences and helping people, whether it be clinical, leadership, team development, program development, innovation. That was something that crossed all three. And I knew that I would have enough versatility in that realm to actually make something of myself that would stick. So that provided me with enough structure to rocket through my BA and my PhD, because I didn't have to spend time questioning, what do I want to do? Oh my gosh, anthropology is so interesting, but then there's astronomy, and astronomy is interesting too. And maybe I need to go do like stars and planets charts, and maybe I want to be a sociologist and go to this undiscovered, group of persons and describe how they function. Like everything was interesting, but I had done the work up front to know that there's a difference between what I love, what I'm good at, and what I can actually do to survive. And so I put all those things together, and that really helped me navigate through. Where I got into trouble after grad school, I had gone into the military. I was an officer. I was a psychologist in the military. And then after that, my life, I had worked it through to a point that it was overly regimented. I did not have any flexibility. I had a checklist, and by God, that checklist was going to get done. I had a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan. I even had a plan for the weekend. I gave myself absolutely no room to breathe. And now I'm here and I'm looking at, what part 2 of my life is going to be like. And it's a huge black box. So I guess the advice that I'd give to myself, if I was to dial the clock back 10 or 20 years, was don't forget to breathe. Don't forget to give yourself those creative outlets. So I've started singing again. I've started playing the piano again. I've started doing the things that I'm horribly bad at that nobody would ever, they would actually pay me money to stop, which is a totally different business model. But like, I would not get paid to do these things, but they just make me happy. But those matter to, overcoming a chronic stress situation like the pandemic, or all of the other things that go with being, a minority or a female in the workplace, like I am, all those things. You have to have an ability to express joy. So I think I would have gone back 20 years, grabbed myself by my lapels and my padded shoulder pads and said, calm down.
Right.
Calm down, breathe, and keep the things that bring you joy alive, because that's what's going to sustain you in a chronic stress environment.
I'm glad that you said it, because I find like there's two groups of people that I talk to a lot. One are a group of people who are just dug in, they're understanding that, hey, I want to develop a plan, and they're ready to go, and then they're really, really structured. And then the other people are scared to tell me that, hey, this is what I really want to work on, but because they're scared, I want to give them something that's so structured that they can't follow, and they don't want to really, really get started. I tell people all the time, it's like, don't let perfection be the enemy of
Absolutely.
get something. You build yourself some flexibility in some things, and right now a lot of things are not going as planned. You
Yeah.
have a rainy day fun because it's raining. Don't be surprised that, hey, you're restarting over, and you're not where you want to be. That's all right. We did everything we could to get you in the right place, and we got to move on from here.
Yeah. And it's important. I knew I came from a very poor, disadvantaged childhood, and I broke out of that, and I knew that I needed to have something that would sustain me in order for me to have the flexibility to do the things that I loved. And so I guess I invested in a long-term plan within myself that I knew I had to check certain boxes. For example, my doctorate. I knew that I had to get a PhD in order to have the latitude to pick certain positions that I wanted to. And then that would afford me the freedom to pursue the things that maybe I wouldn't get paid for, but that I would just enjoy. And that felt to me like I wasn't making as much of a sacrifice. And I think that young people who are, on the cusp of going to college, or even people who are looking at retirement and wondering what their second chapter might be, they're faced with the same ethical dilemma of, how do I find meaning? And the fact is that it doesn't have to be 100%. It doesn't have to be the be all end all. It just has to provide you with sustenance and sustainability. And then once you have, like, the Maslow's hierarchy triangle that we're all familiar with, once you have that bottom rung filled, then you can start to pursue the things that you just enjoy. But those things matter. Doing what you enjoy and what your passion is, it matters, and you have to integrate it into your life.
Yeah. And it's it's interesting because obviously I have the background. It's part of my life, but yeah, I still try to find time to socialize and get out there and spend time, figure out what it is that I want, because I'm still learning things. I started learning that I like to learn about languages, and I like to spend time, and I do martial arts. I can't wait to get back. So I got my second scene shot in a couple of days.
How's big form? Chuck Norris.
Yeah, jiu-jitsu.
Likewise.
What are you reading these days? What are some of the things that you like getting into?
So, I've actually not been reading. I've been studying languages, and I know that you mentioned it before, but so I spent exactly 10 months of my life in the United States, and then I moved to Europe, and I grew up there, and then I moved back to the US, and that was a very formative situation. I have always been a lover of languages and a lover of multicultural environments, and so what I spend my free time doing is actually I'm studying Japanese, and that is my eighth language. So I speak English and French, Spanish, German. I speak a little bit of Russian. I speak a little bit of Chinese, and I love Japanese. And I'm learning that. So I'm not so much reading additionals as I am furthering my language abilities, because what I found is that when you speak the language of origin of poetry, or you understand the songs or the meanings, you gather so much more depth, and your relatability to that particular culture just grows exponentially. But before I went into Japanese, I really loved Malcolm Gladwell. I love Simon Sinek. I love the concept of 10,000 hours. And I also suffered through, and I do mean suffered through Nicholas Nassim Taleb's Black Swan. I had to listen to that on tape because I could not get through the book form because it was just so down. But I love the Black Swan idea. And on BBC this morning, I read that in addition to the Black Swan, now there's something called the Gray Rhino. So there's an entire animal there's a whole zoological culture around, unforeseen events and how we react to them. But it was a great article from BBC. But yes, I went through Nicholas Nassim Taleb's Black Swan. I love Howard Gardner's Multiple Intelligences. That he's one of my favorite people in the world. He talks about how individuals can be gifted in certain ways. And to me, that was just so forgiving, because I might be good at something and not something else. And it doesn't mean that I'm dumb. It just means I'm good at one thing and not another. So I took a great deal of solace in Howard Gardner. So I've read everything that he's read, and then the rest is all just like military stuff. But anyway, I hope that helps. In poetry, I love Pablo Neruda. He's my favorite.
Yeah, I mean, I really am getting more back into like understanding behavior economics and psychology, because right now everyone is saying, hey, our decisions are going to be replaced by AI in the next 5 or 10 years. You can learn about like heuristics and how people you can think about making decisions, and experts, and that's but we're all going to get replaced by computers in the next 10 years, so none of that ever really matters. Are we rational people?
Do you want to know why I think that's not true?
Okay, let's hear it.
Okay, I'm gonna get blasted on YouTube and across the world, but AI doesn't have a childhood. Now, you think about your formative years, and you think about how you've been brought up, and the experiences that you've had, your parents have, your grandparents had, the legacy that you feel somehow compelled to represent. If you're a first generation, second generation, third generation, all those things mean something different to you. AI doesn't have that. I think AI has an enormous place in our culture and our society, but AI, they were never children.
That's really like intriguing, because you're right, and that we are all imperfect people program. I guess we can't teach a computer random. We got to teach a computer what random is. Always kind of curious about that whole I'm not an AI expert at all, but I do think there's going to be some place where we can't predict human nature and emotions. And because we're like one of the few things in the universe which our observation of ourselves changes the outcome as it is, and that doesn't really happen that much in the physical world. That making these big decisions requires some level of intuition and experience and respect for human experience.
The other argument I would make is that like this background is just messing with me, but AI doesn't care what other people think about them. Mm-hmm. We do. Mm-hmm. And we're programmed as social animals, depending on what type of goal we want to achieve, whether it's a doctorate, whether it's a promotion, whether it's a client. We are geared to please that individual. That is something that AI does not have yet. They're autonomous, and no disrespect to my future computer overlords, but we care a lot about what other people think about us, and we change our behavior according to that particular audience. So those are the two reasons why I'm like team human at the moment.
Yeah, it's a big, big discussion,
Yes.
And how do we make sure that we differentiate ourselves? And I know you probably talk to a lot of leaderships. How do we make sure we're different? How do we not get replaced by computers in our decision-making process? And what are you telling people? What is it you tell the leaders? How do you leverage AI without getting people, I guess, resentful, or getting people concerned that they're going to get replaced?
Well, I mean, in my world, where rapport is essential to success, you can't fake it. The best predictor of clinical outcomes is a solid rapport with the person who's helping you. So if you're replacing a person with a robot, that robot is going to treat you like a phone tree when you call into Comcast to get your cable fixed. Press 1 if you're satisfied with the customer service that you've received. There's not that direct feedback on a meaningful emotional level, and I don't think that that's something that can be faked or replicated at this point in time.
Okay. Yeah, but they will try.
Yeah.
Bye.
Let's see how they do.
Amy is artificial intelligence. She was just the first thing that I looked at, and because I recognized that when I was a financial planner in other areas, I would say probably about 10 to 15% of my time was dedicated to not meeting with people, but setting up a meeting to meet with people, calling people. And most people I talk to, they have someone that's significant that they make a decision with. They're married. They got to look at their calendar. Then they got to talk to someone else's calendar. I have this artificial intelligence who says, all right, look at my calendar, tell those people what's available, and then they talk to each other, and she corresponds back in natural language to figure out a time that makes sense for everybody. And I think they did some math on it. They said I've saved about 65 hours of time setting up appointments in the last 7 months.
That's amazing. Yeah, that wow. I mean, again, you're like a pioneer, so this is amazing.
Yeah, I'm all about innovation in ways that make sense, and
yeah.
So
well, and I also think that you're quite daring, because the topics that you've picked are topics that people sort of give voice to, but they don't actually discuss in any real depth. And my experience with you and your firm is that you're courageous enough to have these conversations in depth. And the fruit that bears is that it enables people who are of that particular demographic of whatever the topic is that we're talking about to relate and feel less alone. So thank you so much for what you've done so far.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. It's really about talking about the areas that most people don't talk about, really, right? Most people are more of the science when there's really the art of decision making when it comes to your investments and opportunities that you explore to invest in and that sort of thing. Any last words, things you'd like to say?
I would say, I guess, to the target audience, which, the subject of our brief today was about women in finance. But I would include men as well, because they are our allies, our partners, our friends, our colleagues, our brothers, sisters, and sons. We all need to be on the same team and on the same page. We are all in this together. So I would say keep on keeping on, that we need to keep striving and focus more about what we have in common. And I'm reminded very much when I went to South Africa, I had the most amazing experience. I went to Soweto in South Africa, and it was the township that had Sir Desmond Tutu as well as Nelson Mandela. They grew up on the same street, and it is the only street in the entire world to have 2 Nobel Peace Prize laureates inhabit. And Sir Desmond Tutu, he was the orchestrator and the architect of the Truth and Reconciliation Act that functionally ended the apartheid. And the way that he did that was through forgiveness. And he allowed every single person the opportunity, whether they were on the side of the Blanques or the non-Blanques, as they're called in Afrikaans, the opportunity to share their trauma and their victimhood, whether they were ordered to do things that they found detestable or they experienced things that they'll never forget that were highly traumatic. And through his truth and reconciliation of enabling people to air out what had happened to them, he was able to heal the country. And we're in a very similar situation where we've all been through an international trauma. We've all been going through such machinations of meaning, who we are, why we're here, the role that we have, whether it's gender specific, race specific, but we do have a roadmap, thanks to Desmond Tutu, of perhaps how to negotiate the next 5 to 10 years forward in order to come together as a people. So I would say if South Africa can do it, we can too.
Great words. I really do like that. And that's I'll leave it at that. I can't top that. Well, thank you again. Thank you everyone for joining us. Please follow my YouTube page, hit subscribe, and we'll talk again some days.
Thank you.
It's Gamma.